Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, the end is coming, and what happens afterward will shake the world. Now, you might say, well, if the end comes, how is something coming afterward? Well, I'm not talking about the end of the world, not even talking about the end of the age. I'm talking about the end of our current monetary system. So today we're going to talk about what that is, why it must end mathematically. We're going to illustrate that. And we're going to talk about what the implications of that are, because I know a lot of you probably think, this guy talks about financial topics all the time. Why is he must, I know some of you have said, well, do you work in the financial services industry? I don't work in any industry related to that whatsoever. The reason that I talk about these topics a lot, at least for right now until we see some of these things unfold, is because I believe it's fundamental to understanding the fragility of the system we currently have and how quickly it could unravel and help set the stage for the fulfillment of the end times scenarios we read about in the Bible, the end times events we read about in the Bible. So it's essential to understand the concepts we're going to talk about today to really see how the stage is being set for these events to take place. So let's start by talking about, what is a monetary system? What in the world does that mean? Well, it means what it says. Think about that base word monetary, money. It essentially means our money system. What is the money system that we use? So there have been many money systems throughout history. Sometimes people have used, shells and other trinkets as a medium of exchange. Gold and silver have been used in the past. Then you have gold and silver standards. You've heard of a gold standard. That means, well, you have a piece of paper, say $1, that's exchangeable for gold. In return, it's convertible to gold. That's what most of the world was on in the 19th century. Most of the industrialized world used a gold standard. Then you had the Bretton Woods Agreement following World War II, in which dollars were convertible into gold by other countries. So in effect, that was somewhat of a gold standard. But since 1971, globally, we've had fiat currencies, which means little pieces of paper or ones and zeros in a computer somewhere are what we use as a medium of exchange, and governments and central banks can just create these things at will. And we're going to talk about why that's a big problem. Never in history, until the past 50 years, have we had all the nations of the world using a fiat currency system. And keep in mind, all past fiat currencies have eventually returned to their true value, which is zero. And so there's no reason to expect the same will not take place with the current monetary system, with the dollar, the yen, the euro, all these fiat currencies that are used all over the world. I think we're getting near to that time, and we're going to discuss why and why mathematically that has to be. So let's talk about this current system we're on, because we've talked about, in the past people may have used gold and silver, but now we have what's called a debt-based monetary system, meaning our current system really is dependent on debt in order to function properly. And it's more importantly to understand is that it's dependent on the exponential increase of debt in order to keep from completely collapsing and imploding upon itself. So I know that may sound difficult for some to wrap their head around, so I want to use a visual illustration. Now, we're going to start by, I know we've talked in the past, most people are under the incorrect assumption that the way banks work is, well, you You go put your cash, you deposit cash in the bank, and then they hold that on a time deposit and pay you interest, and they loan that out to your neighbor to buy a house, buy a car. That neighbor pays an interest rate that's higher than what they're paying you on that deposit. The bank keeps the spread. That's how banking works. That's how banking used to work. That's how banking should work, I guess you could say. It's not how banking works anymore. And in the current system we have, it's really essential to understand that, to understand how it all works. So the first thing we need to understand is that dollars are not created by the US government. They're not even created by the Federal Reserve. And that's the same in any country. It's not necessarily the central bank or the government. They may issue the official currency that you hold in your hand, but most of that currency is created by the banking system. So for instance, well over 90% of the dollars in existence were created by the banking system. They were loaned into existence. So when someone came to take out a loan to buy a home or to buy a car, the bank simply created that cash out of thin air, put a credit in the person's account so that they could go buy that. That's where it came from, and then voila, dollars were created or euros were created again. So I want to use this as an illustration. So I have here, many of you might remember, this is a $10 fake $10 bill. Well, as my son said when he got this, this was from a backyard Bible camp this summer. It's for motion picture purposes, it says on there. I don't know if you can read all that. But the person handing it out said, I just want to make sure all the parents know about this because it looks so real. I don't want you to think that it's real money. And my son, he's very perceptive. He said, well, a real $10 bill, he said, that's not money either. And I said, that is correct. It's really a piece of paper, no different from this piece of paper right here. But legally, this is treated as a piece of paper. So let's say, for instance, that this $10 represents a loan you're getting at the bank. So they loan you $10. This $10 comes into existence. So now the currency supply has increased by $10. Now, when you pay that back, they're going to expect some rate of interest. So I wanted to get $1 to represent the interest, but the last paper dollar I had went in the collection plate on Sunday. So I've got 4 quarters here. I'm just going to jingle them together. So they've created $10 of new currency. However, that's offset by not just the $10 of debt that you owe back, but the dollar in interest that you owe on that $10 in debt. So if you pay off the $10 in principal and it goes away, now the currency supply is, let's say, 0 in this instance. Let's say we had a total currency supply of $10 when they created this, loaned this into existence. Now you've paid it off, but you still owe $1 in interest. Where does that dollar come from now that the $10 debt has been extinguished? And if you can wrap your mind around that, you can see where the problem comes into play. What it means is, and where that dollar in interest comes from, is it comes from a new loan being made to someone else, meaning more currency is loaned into existence, thus increasing the currency supply so that there is $1 of interest for you to go out and earn to pay that back as you pay back that principal and interest. But here's the thing, when you think about that, we have this ever-increasing amount of debt. What happens if the debt load starts to decline and people start paying off that principal? What if the debt no longer goes up? Well, then it shrinks the currency supply. So if you have a shrinking currency supply, we call that deflation, then that interest, the money the currency that is needed to pay off that interest is harder and harder to come by until it's impossible to come by, till the whole system collapses. And the whole system would collapse long before that. But to illustrate just how fragile this type of system is and why it is completely dependent on ever increasing levels of debt, which is why we've been seeing that for the past 52, 53 years, because people keep saying, how can we keep running up this national debt? And how can people run up credit cards? And how can home prices keep going up and people are further and further into debt? It's because that is the way the system was created. It must do that or it collapses in a deflationary spiral. We saw that happening in the Great Depression. We saw the beginnings of that in the Great Financial Crisis. We're on the verge of seeing it again. So let's take a look at this chart right here. This is from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. And this is debt, U.S. debt, all sectors, everywhere. So this includes government debt, both at the local, state, and federal level. It includes individuals, their debt, corporate debt, all the debt level. Now, if you notice, we have basically this straight upward hill going up. Here we have this, it's been growing and growing and growing for decades. We had this little blip where for about the end of 2008 to the end of 2010, it didn't grow. It maybe shrunk just a little bit. Maybe 1% shrinkage, leveled off flat. That's what caused the Great Recession, guys. I want you to put that in perspective. So just this little tiny blip caused the Great Recession. Imagine what would happen if it actually declined. People started paying back. Let's say everybody started taking the Dave Ramsey course and paying off their debt, and the federal government decided we should have a balanced budget. The entire system would collapse. And so here we have another chart that puts that into better perspective. So this is the same chart, the same information, the same level of debt that we see going up. But this red line down here represents gross domestic product, or in other words, the income that people are earning to service the debt load. And as you see, we go back to the very beginning of the system when Bretton Woods was ended and Nixon closed the gold window. Total debt was about 50% higher than total annual income for the United States, or gross domestic product. Where are we today? Well, today we're it looks like about 3.5 times that amount. So we're seeing this widening gulf between our debt load and our ability to service that debt load. And guys, what did I say at the beginning? What can't continue will not continue. So there comes a point where individuals can only take on so much debt before they're unable to make the payments, and therefore they aren't taking on new debt. And there comes a point where governments take on so much debt that they can no longer take on new debt. We've talked about the United States government paying $1 trillion in interest on the national debt every year, and adding over $1 trillion every 3 months now to the national debt load. There comes a point, especially as we've seen interest rates go up, we see that interest paid on the national debt go up significantly. So they can't continue to keep seeing interest rates go up, but at the same time, if they don't, people lose faith in the currency. So we're at the end of this game. How close exactly, we don't know. But once people can't take on more debt, once the government can't take on more debt, well, then they don't, and the system implodes. Because why? It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a game of musical chairs. And as you know, Ponzi schemes depend on people taking on more and more investors to pay off the old ones. Let's take a look at right here. This is from Encyclopedia Britannica. A Ponzi scheme is a fraudulent and illegal investment operation that promises quick, easy, and significant returns on investments with little or no risk. A Ponzi scheme is a type of pyramid scheme in which the operator at the pyramid's top, so in this case it would be the government, the banking system, the Federal Reserve, acquires a small group of investors that is initially provided with tremendous investment returns via funds secured from a second group of investors. The second group is in turn paid with funds obtained from the third group. This goes in line with what we were just saying about when the loan is made and that money is created, that currency is created, it requires that further loans be made, further debt to be taken out in order for people to be able to make the interest payments on that initial debt taken out. And if it isn't growing, it falls apart. Just like a Ponzi scheme. Once you reach the limits of growth to where there are no new investors to add, the whole scheme falls apart. And that's where we are with our current monetary system. It's a scheme. It's about to fall apart. We're at the end of this. Is it next month? Is it next year? Is it 5 years away? I don't know. All I know is what we observe, what we see happening. I think we're going to see a crisis unfold here this quarter by the end of March that'll begin to unravel this, and this will become known. But the key to understanding is mathematically this system cannot continue, and therefore it will not. So if I failed to illustrate this so that it could be grasped, that's a failure on my part. I would recommend checking out this video series right here by Mike Maloney at Gold Silver. It's called The Hidden Secrets of Money. And I've talked about this series before. There's, I think, 10 episodes in the series. Highly recommend watching this to understand the world in which we live. But episode 4 is particularly relevant to what we just talked about. And if you go to around the 13-minute mark, he gives a illustration, a visual illustration of what we just talked about. So maybe that might make it easier for people to understand and to be able to grasp this concept that continual growth of debt is necessary to keep the system going. Once that stops, the whole thing falls apart. And I believe we're getting close to that period in time. And so, guys, again, why is this relevant to Bible prophecy? Why is this relevant to the end times? Well, because when that happens, we're going to see global financial chaos, bigger than what we saw during the Great Depression. And when we look throughout history, whenever we've had financial chaos, we've had financial crisis, people have been made destitute through hyperinflation or through deflationary collapses. And we see that type of economic dislocation. It tends to be quickly followed or sometimes even preceded by war, revolution, the rise of demagogues and dictators, and government overreach to control the general population. So we have the conditions in place right now. We have a very fragile system that is coming to an end. And they know many of the people at the top. So there are two types of people, and this is why it can be confusing to say, is this incompetence or is it an intentional plan? And the answer is yes, right? So there are people who say, work at the U.S. Federal Reserve, who are probably clueless, ignorant, and incompetent. But there are people who were instrumental in the creation of the Federal Reserve, or at least the people who have taken over their positions of power since, who understand the system and understand that it is mathematically coming to an end. And that's why they're positioning themselves. They're putting the infrastructure in place for what the next system will be. They want to keep the system propped up as long as possible because there's no guarantee they can control things in the midst of this chaos once it comes to an end. But knowing it must come to an end, they've put the wheels in motion for a new system to be rolled out. And at the heart of that new system is central bank digital currency, which is why we've heard all of the governments, all of the central banks around the world talking about central bank digital currencies, exploring the idea of central bank digital currencies, studying the idea of central bank digital currencies. We don't intend to roll these out anytime soon, they may say, for those that haven't already. And of course, you shouldn't believe all these conspiracy theorists who say that the central bank digital currency is going to be programmable and that it will be weaponized against you in any way. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's just a digital representation of the same currency you've always held in your hand. It's there to complement it and be there with it. It's not there to replace it. That's how it'll start. Then it will replace it. Then it will be programmable. They want to walk the world into this cage and shut the door because they know once that happens, well, they don't have to worry about the next monetary system and the end of its life. They'll have us all because there's no escape from that system, that economic system that will be able to control who buys and who sells. Again, this is relevant because the Bible foretold this almost 2,000 years ago in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, verses 16 through 17. You can read about the mark of the beast system that enables the Antichrist, the false prophet, to control who can buy and who can sell all over the face of the planet. And again, this is a global issue we're seeing with the end of the monetary system. It's not just a US problem. It's all over the world. All the nations of the world use fiat currencies. All of these will eventually go to zero because that's the worth. The intrinsic value of a fiat currency is zero. It's either a piece of paper, right? Or it's a 1 and a 0 in a computer somewhere. It's not something real that you can put your hands on like gold or silver or copper or lumber, anything of real value. It's a construct. And it only has value as long as people have faith in it and confidence that it has value. And so we're seeing the system come to an end. This is going to lead to great financial upheaval throughout the world when it takes place. We're already seeing the beginnings of that through the inflation we've seen over the last 3 years. Again, this is a global inflation that we've seen over the last 3 years. It's not located in a specific country. And this is a result of this dying system that we see right now. And this is going to be a major event when we see this system collapse and fall apart. And again, it creates fertile ground for the rise of demagogues and dictators. It creates fertile ground for the launch of their central bank digital currency plans, which again is not the mark of the beast, but it sets the stage for that. It's indistinguishable in function from the mark of the beast, and that they can put you in that system and then they can cut you off. Say that you can no longer participate in the system. your digital currency no longer works, or it only works under certain circumstances. And that's how they'll gain control, akin to what we read about in the book of Revelation. So guys, when you look at this with all the other signs that Jesus and the prophets said to look for, with the nation of Israel back in the land of Israel, we see the gospel being spread all over the world. We see all the things Jesus and the prophets said to look for. And Jesus said, when you see those signs, look up, your salvation draws near. I'm right at the door. And then we see essentially this financial time bomb set to blow up at any moment in the midst of all of these signs. And the repercussions of that would be to create things that historically tell us would play into seeing end time events unfold, such as the rise of a global dictator, hyperinflation on a global scale, as we read about in Revelation 6. So this is why I talk about these things a lot about finance, because right now I think this is a front burner issue that we're observing in the world, an event that's taking place in the world that has profound implications for Bible prophecy, specifically end times Bible prophecy. And I think we need to be aware of it, understand what the system is, why it is coming to an end. Because once you do that, you understand how fragile it is, how it could quickly unravel, and how we could very soon see the stage set even further for the 7-year tribulation period. And guys, while that sounds bad, it is good news, because it means we're even closer to the return of Jesus Christ. I believe Jesus could come at any moment. At any moment, he will come for the church through the rapture. But the second coming of Jesus Christ to establish his kingdom here on this earth comes at the end of the 7-year tribulation. So the closer we get to that, and when we can see that taking place, we know, well, Jesus is coming to establish his kingdom very soon. So we can get excited about that. Our hope is not in the things of this world, but in Jesus Christ. So let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. Make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. I'll make sure to put a link pinned at the top of the comments to the Mike Maloney video. If you want to try to understand more of how this monetary system works. But in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments below. And God willing, I will see you on Friday. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.